Hello, and welcome to Cornwall Woman, the podcast for cool Cornish women living life their way. I'm Karen Perry. I'm currently standing on the beach at Newlyn, looking out over Mounts Bay. It's a beautiful, crisp, winter's day, blue sky, and I can actually see a rainbow over Penzance. I'm not making that up. In this third series, we're focusing on the county's fantastically vibrant and inventive performing arts scene. My guest in this first episode is the very lovely and super talented actor Mary Woodvine. She was a core member of Kneehigh Theatre in the 90s and has since appeared in countless productions across Cornwall. She's been on our small screens in everything from Eastenders to Poldark, and now takes the lead in Mark Jenkin's hugely anticipated follow-up to Bait, Enys Men.
Hello? Is there anybody there?
Mark Commode describes Mary's performance as mesmerising. She's also a brilliant comic actor, amazing singer, an all-round good person. I met her over a cup of tea at her home in Paul, not far from here. Mary is from an acting family, and I started by asking her about that.
My dad is an actor. My dad's in the latest film that I'm in at the moment, and he's 93. And my mum was also an actor. That's how they met. They were doing a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and my mum was studying at the Bristol Old Vic, and Dad had come in. He'd trained at RADA, and he was playing one of the lovers in Midsummer Night's Dream, and my mum was a fairy.
Oh,
And
that's pretty romantic.
I know, and they got together. Which I think they were together for like 25 years before they split up, so they did pretty well.
That's not bad.
No.
And he was in that amazing film American Werewolf in London.
Yeah. I went to the cast and crew screening of that when I was 14 at the Curzon in Soho, and it definitely altered the whole of the rest of my life from that moment on. I've got a pretty overactive imagination, and I couldn't do anything, because like they're in his nightmare scenes, when there's a particular one where he's watching the Muppets, and there's a knock at the door, and his whole family are watching the Muppets, and there's a knock at the door, and then these horrible people come in with like helmets and then just shoot them all dead. So I couldn't watch the Muppets after that.
Oh my God.
Because I was terrified that was going to happen. I still have trouble sometimes coming up from Mousel in the dark on the lane.
Really?
And I'm 55,
In case a werewolf Muppet jumps out.
Yeah, in case a werewolf Muppet jumps out. But it's an absolutely genius film.
It is. And you went on to train yourself at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. Did success come quite quickly for you?
I think I was really, really lucky. I managed to get an agent straight after drama school, and then I'd done the National Youth Theatre the year before, the 2 years before I went to drama school. And in the final year at the National Youth Theatre, you get cast in a play, and the director was a guy called Bill Buffery. So I had finished drama school, went to London to live with my mum, did some temping. I was working as a ward clerk in the maternity unit of a hospital in Hammersmith. And I'd heard that this guy, Bill Buffery, who directed it, had got this new directorship of Orchard Theatre Company, who are based in North Devon, in Barnstaple. So I just sent him a postcard and said, I've left drama school, and, please would you consider me while you're casting, if there's anything you think might be suitable. And he got straight back to me, and that was my first job, which was working in Barnstaple for Orchard, who then used to tour the whole of Devon and Cornwall. Mm-hmm. But then, because I was doing theatre in Devon, and that was the first time I ever came to the Acorn, so that would have been in 1990.
The Little Acorn Theatre in Penzance.
Yep. And it was amazing. People were living there. The dressing room was also somebody's living room, and but then, of course, everybody, in the same way as it is now, everybody supports one another. So all the other theatre companies, you always go and see each other's work. Like now, everybody always goes and sees each other's work, and that's when I met people from Kneehigh, Mike Shepherd, who ran Kneehigh, was the director at the time and the founding member, came to see this production. And that was it, really. And then I got involved with Kneehigh. And then...
Amazing. So you were in the Southwest from the get-go?
Really? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my first job was here, and then that was it. And then, but luckily, I was really, really lucky. I already had an agent in London, so I managed to just go backwards and forwards and do little bits of telly. So all the way through the 90s, I had a really healthy television career as well.
So why didn't you want to live in London? Because for most young people starting out in their career in theatre and drama, London is the place, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I already felt like I had it. I couldn't tell people when I went for jobs that I didn't live in London. My agent always said that. Don't tell them you live in Cornwall. Don't tell them you live in Cornwall. But I was already part of this really, really exciting theatre scene. You know, Kneehigh was outdoors. We always did a scripted indoor show around Christmas. I did all of Nick Dark's plays that he'd written around that time. But the Kneehigh outdoor show was always a sort of devised around a story, big outdoor immersive theatre kind of jamboree with fire and juggling and all of those other things. And it was just brilliant outdoor theatre.
And actually, of course, there is outdoor theatre in London, but it's nothing like the scale of that kind of stuff that's happened in Cornwall, you know, on beaches and in incredible locations.
Yeah, but I think because of where we were, but also lots of the people that worked for Kneehigh at that time were people who'd come from an organisation called Welfare State, where they'd, like Anna Murphy and Sue Hill and Alice, my sister-in-law, Giles King's sister.
So this is Giles King, your
Giles
first
King,
husband.
my first husband. They'd all done huge, great outdoor community projects. So that's where the whole thing of lanterns came in and using fire, and because it was all about sort of engaging community and bringing alive lots of events. So Galawan Maisie Day was re-enlivened by Sue Hill and Anna Murphy.
Penzance major festival.
Apparently the second largest outdoor festival in the country, Notting Hill being the first one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Maisie Day being the second one.
That's very cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And then Tom Bocock's Eve, which is Christmas Eve, the 23rd, which was traditionally a lantern procession where people celebrate a story that may or may not be true about a man who goes to sea because the village is starving and comes back with lots of fish, and there's a big celebration, and the pub still makes a starry gazy pie, which is a great big pie with pilchards or mackerel heads poking out the top. So, you know, it kind of came, all of this stuff was brought back, exciting, brilliant landscape spectaculars, which we've then gone on to with Wildworks. So I think I already had it here, and I could get my fix, go up to London, do 4 days on set and do, you know, pay the mortgage with a Born and Bred or a Casualty or a Heartbeat or something like that bill. I knew I didn't want to be in London, and I knew from 17, I think, because I knew what it felt like to live in a small community where everybody knows who you are. And I still feel the same now, that I know my place in my community. I know where I fit, and that's really important for me. You know, I grew up in London in a time where there was, you know, I did know everybody on my street, and my mum would send me to the shop, so I knew everybody on the local high street. But still, that wasn't the same as being in Cornwall, tripping up to the village shop and knowing everybody in the shop, and, you know, going up there for 5 minutes and coming back an hour later.
Yeah.
Which is still the same now.
Yeah.
And also, working for Kneehigh, like all of my mates who I'd been at drama school, who I was still friends with, they'd all go, "Oh my God, I'd love to work for Kneehigh." So it was like kind of every actor's dream to work with a company like that.
It's about 20 years now since you played Mary Harkinson in EastEnders, and I was such a big fan of EastEnders. But what was it like to be in, you know, probably the number one show of the UK?
It wasn't really very nice, to be fair. I got my script the night before I was meant to do my first day filming. It's really scary going into an established thing like a soap. I mean, and I had some quite nice scenes in that. You know, it was a quite nice little, and with the denouement on Boxing Day, I think it was. Yeah, the script arrived late, and the worst thing was, I was so busy looking at my lines, learning my lines, and I had to get the train from Euston up to Elstree and Boreham Wood, and I was so busy looking at my lines that I missed the stops. I got off the stop and at the next station, crossed over and went to the next other platform and said to the guard, there was a train on the platform, and I said, when's the next train to Elstree and Boreham Wood? And he said, it leaves from this platform. So I waited for that train to leave and waited for the next train, and that was the train I should have got. Why he didn't say, get on this one, love. Get on this one. It's leaving in 5 minutes. He didn't. He said it leaves from this platform.
How weird.
Honestly, it was awful. So I kept the whole crew and cast. I arrived 45 minutes late. Oh. Can you imagine how much that cost them?
That's horrific.
It was awful. And I was working with Wendy Richards, you know, plays Pauline, and she really wasn't very happy with me. So like literally my first date was really not very,
is horrible.
Wasn't very nice at all.
No. And much later you were in Poldark.
Yes.
So back on home turf.
Yep.
How was that?
Oh, it was brilliant. Yeah. And luckily it was a lovely casting director called Liz Stoll, who I think had cast me in Judge John Deed. So I emailed Liz and I said, I live in Cornwall, I've got a decent Cornish accent. And she got back to me straight away and went, oh my God, what a brilliant idea. Yes, of course, that'll be lovely. Sadly, I wasn't cast as a Cornish character.
You were quite a posh person.
I was posh. I was, yes, Mrs. Teague, the terrible Mrs. Teague with her 5 daughters that she was trying to marry off.
And the most hilarious double entendre.
With the syllabubs.
Can you do that line for us again?
I only watched it the other day because I put it on in my show reel. I think it's something like...
You're talking about
my
trying
daughters,
to get one of your daughters
to marry off to Poldark. And I say, and once you've tasted the succulence of her syllabubs, they're something to be believed. It was the bloody best line in the whole thing, I reckon. I was really lucky to get it.
So moving on a bit to 2019, Bait was released, written and directed by your partner Mark Jenkin, which you were in. Extraordinary film, obviously in so many ways. Did you have any idea quite how successful it would be?
No, we had no idea. And interestingly enough, a couple of months ago, the latest film that I'm in of Mark's is called Enys Men, and we amazingly had our premiere in Cannes. And 2 days before we went to Cannes, I rang up Ed, who is the lead, plays the lead Martin. Ed Rowe plays the lead Martin in Bait, and I rang him up and I said, oh my God, I said, I feel so responsible for the success of this film.
Because you're playing the lead.
I'm playing the lead. I said, is this what you felt like before you went to Berlin? Because Bait premiered in the Berlinale, the Berlin Film Festival. And Ed was like, nah, no, nobody knew I was. Nobody knew Mark was. No, wasn't worried about it at all. I was like, oh, brilliant, great, that's good. But it was incredible. We had no idea. And we were in this brilliant sort of old-fashioned sort of glory hotel. It was brilliant, and the premiere cinema was right over, literally across the street. And we came out of the hotel, crossed the road, and there were these queues of people outside the cinema. And Mark turned to the producer who was there and said, well, what else is on tonight? You know, what are they all queuing for? And it was an 800-seater cinema, and it was just showing Bait. So from the very beginning, we were like, we couldn't quite believe it. It was extraordinary. And went in and watched the film. And it was, as we came out, somebody said, oh, have you seen the Guardian review? And it was the review we'd had from Michael Billington about Bait. And that's when it all changed, really, I suppose. And he liked Enys Men as well.
Great. And it won so many awards, including BAFTA for...
Outstanding debut.
And you went on this sort of whirlwind of different premieres and film festivals and things like that. How did that feel? Coming, you know, we're sitting in your house now in Paul, you know, right at the end of the line in Cornwall. You talked about the lovely quiet life here where everybody knows each other. And then you go into that sort of glamorous, glossy, red carpet, journalists, interviews.
It's totally surreal. So like before the BAFTAs, I went to the Ritz and had my makeup and hair done. That's kind of part of the invitation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for the people that were up for awards. So I went to the Ritz and sat down and had my makeup done by this amazing guy. It is so surreal. And then again this time round with Enys Men, because I'm the lead in it, you kind of can't quite believe it's all happened. Like going to Cannes. I mean, it was really stressful.
And you had difficulty getting there as well, didn't you?
Yeah. We'd gone on Eurostar with Denzel Monk, who's the producer, and his wife Amanda, and there were these amazing sort of storms going on. And as we came out of the tunnel, the Channel Tunnel on the other side, on the French side, further down the line, it was struck by lightning, and so then everything was kind of kaput. All the trains stopped, and we sat there for 2 hours. So we didn't know how we were going to get there, and I was quite zen about it, but because I was going, we'll get there. But of course, Mark was obviously feeling quite.
It's quite a big gig.
Quite a big gig. I'm going, oh well. It's like, what are you talking about? And so what we had to do in the end, we got to spend the night in Paris for the night, where we then had to get up about 4:45, get the train, change at Marseille, and then go on to Cannes. And that was the day of the premiere.
Oh.
So we were met at the train station by the promoters and the sales agents, and they walked us to our hotel, which was literally like 3 minutes away, and then said, right, we'll see you back here in an hour in the foyer. Wow. So we literally had an hour in the end. We probably all aged a bit that night.
Yeah. Yeah. So you play the lead in Enys Men, but it wasn't a given that you were going to have that role to start with.
No. So Mark had written the film, and he said, I really need a woman in her sort of late 40s, early 50s as the lead. And I sort of wave at him across the table sometimes.
I can think of someone.
There's someone right here. And he kept saying, it can't be you, I need it to be somebody else. You know, and this went on literally for months and months and months of me trying to cast it for him and making suggestions and sort of saying, oh, well, how about so and so? She'd be really good. And eventually he had a meeting with Denzel Monk, the producer, and came back one day and went, so I've had this meeting with Denzel, and we've decided that it probably is best if you play the role. There was no there was no kind of fanfare or sort of, and that was it. And I went, oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was really underwhelming, but it was meant for me. Had felt like this sort of should have been this kind of incredibly sort of overwhelming moment, and it was totally. He sort of played it down, and then Denzel said, afterwards, I saw Denzel. He's just like, yeah, I knew it was written for you. It was never going to be anybody else. But I think Mark was really worried about being accused of nepotism.
Mm-hmm. Where was it filmed?
All around here, on the moors, sort of near Pendine, near Menontoll, all around the moor, sort of around behind Penzance, up sort of between Penzance and St Just, Pendine area.
My patch.
Your patch.
So most people won't have seen it yet. What's it about?
It's about a woman, and she's like a wildlife volunteer. So she's living on her own on an uninhabited island, apart from her, obviously. And she's observing a very rare flower growing, and so she's recording it. So every day she gets up and she goes to look at the flowers, measures the temperature, soil temperature, sees if there's any change. And the idea is that they've grown because of the minerals in the soil, because of the mining and because of what can be mined there, the particular minerals in the soil. So there's quite a lot of repetition, but she's also visited by people from the past, people in her life, people that are still kind of in the landscape. Anna Maria Murphy, who's a writer living here. She was the woman I talked about earlier that worked for Welfare State. She's a poet and a writer, and she co-wrote Tristan and Isolde, which was a really well-known play that Kneehigh did. She saw it and she just said it's like a love letter to the landscape and everything that's happened in the landscape. So the volunteer she's not actually alone, really.
Mm-hmm.
And often people talk to me about that in context of the film, and I talk often about it in terms of nature, because if you're not talking about human contact, there's always nature. You're never alone if you want to go outside and commune with nature and look around you and see growth and life. And
we do have that sense of familiarity here because the seasons are more obvious somehow than they are in cities, and we know what's coming and which flowers are about to appear at certain times of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think during lockdown as well, a lot of us, we surround ourselves with routine. We try to make sense of life, didn't we? So I don't know about you, but we certainly did. Before we even were told how much exercise we're allowed to do, and before my son's school had told him how he was going to work, we'd written up a plan. We had the structure of what each day was going to look like. And that's what the volunteer does. She has structure to her day. She's created structure in her day. And also everybody lent on nature, didn't they? Not everybody, people who were able to, but even people who were in cities and built up areas, everybody suddenly became aware of the importance of the natural world. But there are micro moments of this film, so you get great, beautiful, sort of huge vistas of the landscape, but then you have these you'll have a close-up of an ant or a slug, and you see this, and then suddenly it goes into micro, and you see actually all of the life that's all going on all of the time. And you can think of that as her not being alone, because there's always life around you in the natural world.
Yeah. And I understand there's very little dialogue.
Yeah.
Did you have to sort of delve into a different part of your acting talent to bring the volunteer to characterise her?
In some ways it was great not having much dialogue. I didn't have to learn anything. But I think because there's not a lot of dialogue, I was very present when I was doing it. And people often say that acting is reacting. So you're reacting to something or to another person or a conversation or to what you're hearing. And because there's nothing else going on, there aren't many other people for her to interact with, she's reacting to her surroundings. So I just tried to stay present, because you've got to be present. I mean, you can walk along the cliff and sort of have a little think and have a reverie or think about your shopping or your washing or what you're doing later in the week. But there's a part of you that has to be really aware of where you're putting your feet. And you have to remain quite present to stay safe, walking on uneven ground, trudging across heather or, on the cliff path or whatever. You have to be really present to sort of, and be mindful of where you are and what you're doing. So I think most of the time I was just kind of being present and reacting to my environment as opposed to people, which is what often happens in theatre and television.
It has been described as a horror. I'm a complete ninny when it comes to scary films. Is it safe for me to go and see it?
Yes, it is, because I'm a ninny too. Yeah, it is. It's really atmospheric. I mean, I hate horror films. I can't bear the slasher movies, the gore. It's all too visceral for me. And it's not like that. It's just the atmosphere. It's really atmospheric and it's really unsettling is what it is. There's one jump scare, but it's not that bad.
Sort of suspenseful.
Yeah.
And there were some bits that were scary for you to do, weren't there? I know there's a scene where you had to go down a mine.
Yeah. And that was, I wouldn't say that I was particularly claustrophobic, but the idea of being in a mine and being underground and water dripping and my rational mind going, okay, so this has been here for 100 years, but what if today is the day that it all collapses? So that was quite scary. I didn't like that at all. But weirdly, when you're underground, time does something really weird. And I'd said before we started filming, I don't know how long I'll be able to stay under there. Can we start off with like 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, see how I feel, and I might want to come out. And then an hour and a half had passed and I hadn't even sort of noticed. It was really weird. Time sort of did its own weird thing underground.
But at the same time, your character, the volunteer, she goes through these scary things, but she's not portrayed as a victim.
No, not at all. And I think that's what Mark kept saying to me, because I was going, shouldn't I be running around screaming at this point? You know, shouldn't she be sort of like, you know, totally lost it and be screaming and losing her mind? And he said, no, I don't want that. I don't want this to be about another woman being terrorised who is the victim of everything. She has to always make sense of it and feel in control of it. And I think that's part of the power of it. That's the sort of the weirdness about it as well, is you're kind of expecting her to lose her shit, and she just keeps holding it all together. And that is possibly another reason of why it's kind of so weird. And I know that I kept sort of saying, shouldn't I at this point be running? And he'd go, no. He was really clear about that.
So you carry the whole film, you're on screen 90% of the time.
Yeah.
I saw an interview you did recently where you said, you know, I'm a woman in my 50s who hasn't had any work done. And it's very unusual to see somebody like you in, you know, carrying a feature film.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is still? It's depressing, isn't it?
It is depressing. I just think because there's this thing about youth, you know, and I look at some of these women who've had so much work done, like Madonna doesn't even look like herself anymore. And she could have been a really fucking sassy woman in her 60s.
Wouldn't she have been continue to be a great role model as an older woman?
Yeah. And you look at the other women who haven't had it done and you just go, wow, you look amazing. Because also what it's doing is it's just reinforcing that there is no beauty in age, and that to hang on to that, you have to be young, you have to be looking young. And I worry about these women who start having work done in their 20s.
Yeah.
That means they've got to carry on doing it for the rest of their lives, but what are they going to look like? So, and you know, I can't say I'm always happy about it, but I want to feel like I'm flying the flag, really.
And for the listener, Mary Woodvine is a particularly beautiful woman.
Oh, thank you.
Fact.
Well, actually, there was a moment where we were meant to be filming the year before, but because of COVID, we couldn't. We had to stall it for a year. And this sounds really, really vain, but I had a whole day of feeling really low and depressed. And Mark was like, what's the matter? And I said, I'm going to be a whole year older when we see this film. So, and I have to show my, you see me in the bath and you sort of see parts of my body. And I was going, so that's going to be, my body's going to be a whole year older by the time we do this filming. And I was happy with it last year, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about it this year. And it really upset me. And that sounds so vain.
No, not at all. I think any woman and most people would understand that. But it's true. It's a sad fact of the way we fetishise youth as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I might watch this film now. I might watch it in 10 years' time when I'm 65 and go, oh my God, look at me when I was 55. Wow. We don't see enough of women. And the women we do see, we tend to see the same women all the time. Amazing actors, but it's nice to, you know, quite nice to see people that we don't see all the time.
And what do you think that yours and Mark's film work has done for the profile of Cornwall? It feels like it's put us on the map culturally. And I have to say, talking with my friends, we all feel collectively very proud of your achievements, as if it's anything to do with us, but somehow, you know, we're just so delighted.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like everybody's behind us. There is a sense of collective pride, I think.
Yeah.
And certainly I can even remember the moment when we were at the BAFTA ceremony and Mark got the BAFTA, and I just had this vision in my head of all of my mates at home jumping up and down, you know, everybody. And then afterwards, like ringing people and going, oh my God, we were screaming, we were all jumping up and down, we'd had a drink. You know, we were all so proud. And that feels brilliant. And whether you like it or not, doing that, you know, the culture of the arts in Cornwall is incredible, and it's just getting better and better. And there's a film industry in Cornwall. We've got, you know, our producer lives in Penzance, and he's doing other work and doing big work up the line, which is where everybody thinks everything happens. You know, traditionally the artists have always been known to, you know, live or work in Cornwall, and now we're doing other stuff and it's all coming from Cornwall, and that feels bloody brilliant. And interestingly enough, recently I've had to have a really good think. I've left my agent recently and I've been looking for a new one, and after 30 years of being with the same agent and having 30 years experience, I wasn't expecting to get rejections, I suppose, from people going, what sort of work do you do? What's the latest work that you've done? And then going, Cornwall. I got 2 emails in one day saying, no, thank you very much. One wasn't very nice and one was really lovely. But I had to have a real sort of think about, what do I want? Do I want to be famous? Do I want acknowledgement? I mean, we all kind of want acknowledgement, don't we? We want people.
That never goes away.
No. And it boiled down to, I want to do good work. And I do good work in Cornwall. I've already got it, rather than my old agent would ring me up and, oh, there's this part. And then it would arrive and it would be like somebody's wife at a cocktail party with 9 lines.
So insubstantial.
And it's just like, actually, no, I don't want to do that.
What you've said there is, and it is kind of a Cornwall woman thing in a way, which is doing the thing that you really want to do.
Yeah.
Not settling, thinking about what you can feel proud about. And some of the things that I've seen you in are small scale things, like Trevithick was just absolute genius, hilarious. Hireth, you know, hugely successful, wonderful production, and many, many, many more.
Yeah, it's really funny. My dad, as we talked about earlier, my dad and my mum were actors, and my dad always has notes for me. So after every production he comes to see, there's always notes.
Okay.
And Trevithick was the first thing he came to see where I didn't get notes. And what he said,
finally did something.
Finally, I know.
So one of the projects I know you're working on at the moment is a monologue written by the playwright Sarah Connors.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, Sarah's a brilliant writer. And Simon Harvey, who's a director in Cornwall, who worked for Kneehigh, who I've actually known since he was about 18, he rang me up and he said, oh, Sarah's written this brilliant one-woman play. Do you want to do it? And I was like, no, I don't want to do a one-woman play. I can't. I'll never learn the lines. I don't want to do that. And he said, oh, come and just do a day on it. We're just going to do R&D, which is research and development. Come and do a day's R&D on it, and we'll have a little play and see what you feel. And me and Si and Millie Jones, who's the assistant director, and Sarah sat downstairs at the Kneehigh Theatre in Penzance, and I read this play. And it's, I think Sarah would be fine. It's, with me saying it's semi-autobiographical, and it's about infertility. And it's absolutely brilliant. And I kept trying to hold it together as I was reading. So I was reading, I got to this one point, I just lost it. And she said, oh, I'm so pleased. She said, I've been trying to hold it together for ages. I was going to say it's not a barrel of laughs, but it is funny, and it is moving, and it's so informative as well. It's made me start having conversations even before I've started working on it. After that day of R&D, I've started talking to my friends who don't have children, either through choice or because they can't, and I've started having a conversation with people about that, and it's already absolutely bloody fascinating and brilliant, and also amazing how cruel other women can be to women who haven't had children. And And I think as somebody who I like to think of myself as being sort of open-minded and empathic, I'm amazed at some of the things that other women have said. You know, you've missed out. You've missed out on the most amazing experience of your life, which I think, how dare somebody else tell you that? And also, she said that there's a common perception that women that don't have children are selfish as well, which again, these like real revelations to me that anybody could sort of have those thoughts. So it's been brilliant, and I'm terrified and excited in equal measure about doing the play. I really, you know, the idea of trying to learn something, and for it just to be me on stage is really, really scary. But it's such a brilliant piece of writing, and also something we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And not necessarily about infertility, but about women who don't have children.
So we're coming to the end of the interview now. A couple of questions that I like to ask my Cornwall women. And this is usually a tricky one, but do you have a favourite place in Cornwall?
Ooh, I have lots of favourite places in Cornwall. If I pick two,
that's allowed.
Is that allowed? Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like
because there's so many.
I feel like you're Lauren Laverne and I'm on desert, telling me whether I can have my luxury item or not. There's a place called Kingsand, which is in southeast Cornwall, which is where I've been going since I was 6, and it is the most beautiful place in the world. Even when it's grey, and even when when the sun's shining, you just think, why would you go to the Caribbean when you could sit here and look at this? And then the other place is actually here in my village in Paul. There's a beautiful quiet garden behind the village hall, which was the old cemetery, and people are buried there. Some people are very old graves, and some of them that are fairly new. And my brother-in-law John's up there. There's also a brilliant Methodist minister called Julian Drew, who died a few years ago, who was just amazing. And he's up there too. So I sometimes go up there because there are quite a few people in there I know, go nuts, have a little chat. But you stand up the top there and you look out and you've got the whole of Mounts Bay in front of you. And you can see all the way to Redruth and Carnbray, and you can see all the way down to the end of the Lizard, and you've got Mounts Bay in front of you with a mount and Penzance onto the left, and then you can look out to see to the right. And I just think I'd be really happy to be here. And I think that is, yeah. So those two places are my two favourite places.
And my final question, how would you describe what it is to be a Cornwall woman?
I just think amazing sense of community, actually. And I'm really, really fucking proud to be here and live here, and to have had Cornish children as well, to feel that I could, because it's about identity. And I think maybe I felt like I never belonged. I think it comes back to that thing that I was talking about earlier about knowing your place and feeling where you belong. And that's why I love working in Cornwall and living here. And it gives you a sense of belonging. And I think maybe being born in London to parents, my dad was a Geordie, my mum was from Bath. I never felt like I belonged particularly. And so to live here and to feel that I belong here, and to have had children who can say that they're Cornish and know where they come from, yeah, I think I've kind of fulfilled what I wanted for myself and through them, but for myself just being here. I love it. I really, really wouldn't live anywhere else.
Mary Woodvine, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
What a totally genuine, generous and fun person to spend time with. I found out after our recording that all the outfits she wears for film festivals and premieres are either borrowed or bought secondhand, so even more cool. We recorded that interview in Mark Jenkin's home office. I was right there in the nerve centre of his incredible body of work. Enys Men is in cinemas nationwide from the 13th of January, but we're privileged with a series of previews and Q&As with Mark Jenkin here in Cornwall, starting at the New Lynn Filmhouse on the 2nd of January. And you can see Sarah Connor's play, Trey, that's spelt T-R-E, at various venues in Cornwall in the run-up to Easter. If you've enjoyed this interview, please do subscribe to the podcast to hear forthcoming episodes and to listen to the other fascinating women in earlier episodes. Coming next, there's a special edition showcasing the amazing and important work of the feminist production collective Scary Little Girls. And after that, an interview with Cornwall's own Renaissance woman, theatre maker, actor and sculptor Sue Hill. Keep in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Cornwall Woman. And please spread the word to other Cornwall women who you think will enjoy this podcast. This is a Western Sounds production by me, Karen Pirrie. The theme music is by Alistair Sterling.